Welcome. Thank you so much for signing up for our ministry events. We're so excited to have you, and we're so excited that you're watching this video training series. It's going to help you be even more effective in your volunteer position. For our next video, I will be interviewing Shay Perera, and we will be discussing food safety and proper serving techniques. Shay is our ministry vice president. He's our head of food coordination services. He's also a registered dietitian and has a lot of experience in the food safety and serving realm. And I'm also blessed to call him my husband. I'm here with Shay Perera. He is our vice president and our head of food services. He is highly anointed for what he's doing. He helps coordinate all of our food services. So Shay, tell us a little bit about how you're qualified and what your experience is with food safety.
I've been a registered dietitian now for about 16 years. Worked in really a number of large institutional settings, so delivering food in different manners to patients in those settings. Sometimes you end up doing things on the fly that you weren't really counting on and having situations arise, but if you remember some key principles, it really helps you through that.
That's really awesome. I'm really glad that he brought up the point of being flexible. So as a volunteer, when you sign up for our food positions such as back house or front house, our volunteers really need to be flexible.
You know, you sign up, you have a certain job in mind. Sometimes that changes, so that could change from the clientele that maybe ask you to do something and there might not be anybody that can do it at the time, so you end up doing that, or you could have to cover for people as well. So for example, in the kitchen, we typically only have 2 or 3 people working there, but if 1 or 2 of those don't show up, that creates a huge problem. So I know in our last event, we had one person that wasn't planning on working in the kitchen, ended up working in the kitchen, did a terrific job, and we'd have really been in a tough spot if we didn't have that person that was flexible.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. Well, talk to me a little bit about food safety, and when people sign up, what should they expect if they sign up for the back house position, i.e. in the kitchen?
With food safety, there's really 2 key components that if you can remember those 2, it'll really help carry you through. And those are both the 2 leading causes of food poisoning. So number 1 is cross-contamination. So you can cross-contaminate in a lot of different ways. The biggest part of that is keeping your hands clean. So doing a hand wash, which the health department tells us should be a 20-second hand wash with warm water. And really anytime you touch anything that is not considered a clean surface, like a clean plate or a clean utensil, then going back to something else, you should wash your hands in between. So for example, if you opened a refrigerator door, if you touch a certain part of your shirt or adjust your glasses or check your cell phone, now your hands are contaminated. So you have to wash hands at that point. Wearing gloves is fine. The health department tells us we should wear gloves for any bare food contact. So if we're actually touching the food, like for example a sandwich, or if we think that we can't really cut a piece of cake without kind of our hand bumping it or something, we can wear gloves. But gloves are not a substitute for hand washing because
that's really good.
They get contaminated just like your hand would. So
right, that makes a lot of sense. And I think sometimes people have this idea that if you wear gloves that you don't need to wash your hands, but yeah, I mean, it makes sense that they would get contaminated just like your skin would.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, and just keeping yourself free of hazards that could go into something. So if you have, like for example, long hair, it should be kind of tied back or restrained a bit so that it's not falling into something. You really wouldn't want to bring any type of dangling jewelry with you, long earrings, long bracelets, things like that. Because those things can get caught and you could get injured from that. It could also kind of fall into the food. We also want to be mindful of our guests that may not have a lot of jewelry and those types of things as well. So I think for a lot of reasons, you know, you want your clothes to not be so loose fitting that they can be falling into things as well.
Right. Ties are a great example of that. Now, for each event, we do have dress codes, so we do ask our volunteers to adhere to those. And a lot of those things are set up with those kinds of things in mind. So at the King's table, if you're working in the kitchen, you definitely don't want to be wearing any kind of tie. If you're in a server position, you definitely want to have your hair pulled back, because the last thing you want to do is be serving someone and your hair is dangling over their food. So.
Yeah, sometimes it's even the appearance of that type of thing that can really turn somebody off.
Yeah, that's awesome. So tell me a little bit about temperatures and how we kind of keep and make sure that our food is at the right temperature to avoid any illness.
Right, yep, temperatures are the number 2 leading cause of food poisoning. So the temperature danger zone is anywhere from 41 degrees to 135 degrees. So if you think about it, that's pretty much habitable temperatures that we would live in, that most of the time outside would be, that the rooms that you're in would be, the inside of your car, those types of things. So that's everywhere from bringing food in the door to preparing food and then to serving food to somebody. So all cold foods, so if we're doing something like a potato salad, a coleslaw, really anything with like a milk to it, those foods should all be refrigerated. One trick that we can do if we're space allows is we can kind of freeze those types of things just a little bit to get them nice and cold, so that they will hold longer. Hot foods, of course, they want to be 135 or more. So when we're reheating something, we want to get it to 165. But then it should be held at 135 degrees. So it's important then to make sure that we're using proper techniques to hold things, like with chafing dishes or inside a warm oven. We really don't want food sitting out at room temperature for very long. So, and that's part of the importance of having the coordination with the wait staff as well. So they're taking the plates away so they're not just sitting there. Of course, foods like bread, cookies, cakes, those types of things are okay to sit out at room temperature. But we're talking about more the hazardous foods, the protein foods that we need to be careful with. And anything prepared, even like cut vegetables and those types of things are prepared, so they should be at either a cold or hot temperature.
Yeah, that's really good information. And typically what we do for our events is the ministry purchases things like the meat and anything cold, and then we have things kind of donated that can be kept at room temperature. So like for the King's table, we had potatoes and rolls and things like that donated, and we purchased the meat. And that way we could make sure that it was kept at the constant temperature. And things like Cookout for Christ, we're going to have potato chips donated and desserts that are already made donated. So in the hot dogs, we're going to be purchasing and taking care of. That way we can make sure that everything is going to be kept at a right temperature. But it is important if somebody's signing up to bring a dessert, that they make sure that that dessert has been properly taken care of before donating it to us.
That's right. Still applies. So you want to keep those things, and you wouldn't want to, for example, even if it is something like a bread or a potato, you wouldn't want to leave it in a car where it could be hot or outside exposed to the elements. You wouldn't want to break the packaging that those types of foods are in. So, of course, we wouldn't want anyone to get sick from anything that they're eating. And some populations, especially like the elderly, we do have some children that we've served. People that might have an immune system that's compromised already or more susceptible than most folks are.
Right.
So you do have that extra risk factor there as well.
Yeah, that's really good. All right, so temperature. So as our head of food coordination, Shay actually is the one who monitors our more sensitive foods, like the protein foods, and actually records them for the ministry so that we can comply with health department regulations and make sure that we're being safe and we're doing everything the right way for everybody. So as a volunteer, if you have any questions about how to use chafing dishes, like you want to make sure that you ask your leadership, and you want to make sure that you ask Shay.
That's right. Yeah, we'll always have people back in the kitchen that are working in that environment. But of course, as I mentioned before, things don't always go exactly how you might have planned. So I may have to run somewhere to get something, or someone else that you're working with in the kitchen might. You might turn around and realize you're the only one in the kitchen at that point in time. So that is a good point. And yep, we do keep temperature logs just so we can track those things. We'd rather, if we have to reheat something, or even if we had to throw something out, we'd rather do that and be safe than sorry.
That's awesome. That makes me feel a lot better to hear that, because I know that's really important. We want to help people. We don't want to do things that are going to make life harder for them or lead to a bad experience.
That's right.
So tell me a little bit about what should our volunteers expect if they sign up for the server position, the front of house, when serving our guests?
Yeah, so when signing up with the server position, that is certainly a very busy position. It can also be a demanding position, physically and emotionally. So that's something that you do have to keep in mind with that. People tend to come in waves, so it's not always a constant, steady flow. So depending on how transportation has arrived, you may get a group of 10 or 15 people coming in at once. These are people that might not have eaten that day yet. So they tend to be hungry. We don't want people to be sitting around too long smelling food, watching other people eat. So we want to try and seat them and get them some food and drink as quickly as possible. Mm-hmm. So those are all things to keep in mind. We get a lot of special requests from the guests, things that they want. So it's important to try and stick to the foods that we do have available. Sometimes we're working with limited resource, a limited amount of space in the kitchen. For example, we may have some foods that are designed especially for the children to have. Mm-hmm. Adults may request those foods, but we really try and stick to an adult menu and a child menu. So I've seen some situations where maybe folks our servers get a little bit uncomfortable telling somebody no, but it's just for the enjoyment of all the guests that we're able to stick to what we have to serve.
Yes, and you want to do it in a way that's loving and respectful. So tell me, what should our servers do if they're asking somebody, letting them know the menu and asking if there's any dietary restrictions or food allergies? I know sometimes we can substitute, for the kids' menu. How should they approach that?
Yeah, hopefully that's something that we'll have coordinated ahead of time, but of course there's going to be those situations that we just might not be aware of. So the best thing to do if you're ever in doubt is just come back, find me, find somebody that's working back in the kitchen, and we can try to work that out. So there's hundreds of different situations, allergies, things like that could come up. It might be something we're not always able to accommodate, but maybe, for example, if somebody can't have a particular dish and we don't have a backup, we can give them double of something else. But that's something that we'll just have to make a case-by-case decision on.
That's really good. So how should the servers handle requests for seconds or additional servings?
Yeah, we have to be careful with that when we first start out, especially because the way that we get most of our food items are through donations. So we have a limited amount of funds that we work with in order to purchase based on the amount of people that are there. So we really go by a count and an expected count. So any type of request for that, we just tell them, we have a certain menu and a certain portion that we stick with. Everybody gets the same. Kind of an easy out for you, I think, is to go ahead and just tell them that, we want to make sure that we don't run out for everybody.
Right.
And then what we do is, in the end, we're able to, anything that we have left over, we're able to go ahead and give double portions. So I know at our last event, we were able to give several people double portions. Some people, even from the beginning, waited around throughout the event. They were able to get doubles in the end, and then we were even able to give them to-go boxes. So they were able to take to-go boxes home. So that's the best way to handle it, because we'd certainly hate to give somebody a double portion and then somebody else didn't have anything to eat. I think we'd all feel horrible if somebody had to sit there without anything to eat.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think the biggest thing to keep in mind when signing up for this event is flexibility, because, we have an idea of the way that things are going to go, but when we're working with the type of ministry that we're doing, we can get so many unexpected curveballs, and we could end up with, more people than we had planned to serve, or not enough. So it's always better to be safer than sorry at first, and then we can go ahead and make that call once we get closer to the end.
Sorry?
So tell me, what else should our servers, what kind of technique should our servers be aware of when they're serving their guests?
I think one thing is watching the flow out of the kitchen. So in the kitchen, it's a hard job trying to keep up with the amount of plates that are there. So you do want to be mindful of that. For example, if we have 15 plates ready to go, you want to make sure you're coming back and getting those plates out so that we're getting the guests fed as soon as possible. If the kitchen's getting backed up a little bit, that's where maybe you have the opportunity to stall time a little bit in talking with the guests. As you approach the table, you want to be mindful. You want to try not to touch the guests. If you touch somebody on the shoulder, on the top of the back, those types of things are okay. But you want to be able to talk slowly enough and loud enough so that the guests can all hear you. You want to be welcoming to the guest. This is, these events are set up as kind of fellowship events. And part of the point of the event is for the guest and the public in general, our volunteers, to all be spending time together. So you don't have to worry about it being super formal. We want to make a nice event, but at the same time, we want to be able to talk with our guests and kind of have fellowship with our guests. So you want to be careful not to contaminate things, of course, that you're touching, and that's just something that we would all, if we went to a restaurant, we wouldn't want a server touching the inside of the glass or touching the end of the silverware that we eat with. You wouldn't want to be, handling even somebody's napkin that they're going to use to wipe their mouth with. It's those type of things to keep in mind. So if you have a cough or a sneeze, it might not be the best position for you to be in at that time. We don't want to get anybody sick, and we want to be mindful of people eating a nice meal in that environment.
I think that's a really good point. I think just kind of viewing it as a restaurant, like if you were going to a restaurant, how would you want somebody to treat you? And I think we can all relate to that because we've all been to restaurants, we've all been to nice places and things like that where we've had really good service and we've had not so good service. So I think being personable is really important. We want our guests and we want the people attending our events to feel welcome and loved. We want them to come back. We want to share the love of Jesus with them. So that's really important. Like you mentioned too, when you handle their glasses, touching from the bottom, and handing a piece of silverware, from the bottom and things like that. That's really important.
That's right. And yeah, it's a good point about, kind of the customer service and dealing with that person, because you're probably going to be their main contact throughout the event. So they might not elect to really have any ministry time, or it might be kind of a shorter ministry time that they have with somebody. They're probably not going to see the people that are cooking the food. The people that are doing the music, they're going to be probably up on stage most of the time, or they're going to be in an area that's not really accessible. So as a server, you are their main contact person that they're going to have during that event. So you can't underestimate how important that job is. You may think, well, I'm just a server, I'm just bringing things. But you are the main contact, just like when you go to a restaurant that we talked about. You're not seeing the cook at Applebee's. You're not seeing the corporate staff at Applebee's. You're judging your experience on that server.
That's really good. Yeah. And we do want to encourage our volunteers to share their stories with their guests. So if you have a powerful testimony and a guest gives you the opportunity, you don't want to just share it. You want to wait for the opportunity to share it. But I mean, you're absolutely right. That may be their only point of contact, and that may be Jesus to them that night. So it's an incredibly important position. And we do ask, we typically assign one server to a table. So that particular table, and it also depends on the space. So you can have anywhere between 8 and 10 guests. So, one server per table is really ministering to those 8 and 10 guests for the evening through their serving.
Yeah. Yes, you want to be accessible to your table, and it's finding that balance with not overwhelming your table as well.
Yes.
So, and again, we can always just keep going back to the restaurant example. When you have someone that's a server every 2 or 3 minutes asking you, would you like your drink filled? Would you like something else? How's your meal? That can get a bit burdensome at times. So, but when you also, if you need something, it can be really disappointing not to have that.
Right.
So if you have a salad with no salad dressing on it, if you don't have butter for your bread, just those simple things can really make what you have just an unenjoyable experience. So you don't want to take for granted, somebody, the table, like butter could run out. Somebody might not have had a drink yet that day and could drink their water while you're tending to somebody else and could be really thirsty. So somebody could have a dry throat, a rough cough, and they might not be able to eat their meal without having sips of water back and forth. So you do want to try and be attentive to their needs without pushing too much.
Yes, that's very good. I like that a lot. Yeah, it's important. We've all had those experiences where we've kind of been waiting to eat our delicious steak dinner and we have no knife to cut it. So
yeah, that's right. Somebody drops their silverware, especially children. But anybody could drop their silverware. And be sitting there watching everybody else eat.
Right. Well, thank you so much. We are so grateful for him. He does an amazing job with coordinating our food, and he is just an amazing man of God, and I'm so grateful to have him as our ministry vice president and also my husband. So
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think it's important to try and find a position that fits for you. So we do often need people to work with the food. A lot of people aren't really comfortable with that. So if you think that's something you would enjoy, it's often a hard job and a hot job.
Yes.
So sometimes you're working over a flame or over an oven, working in kind of a small area sometimes. So you do have to keep in mind if you don't handle the heat real well, it could be a hot job. But it's a fast-paced job a lot of times too, trying to get meals out. So as we said, people come in rushes, and you often, you want to see the people fed as quickly as we can get them fed. So, but we're always looking for somebody good to work in the kitchen.
That's awesome. Thank you, Shay.
You're welcome.